Picture this. It's week 3 of summer camp, and you're watching kids zone out during another boring activity session. Sound familiar? Here's something that might surprise you. The most successful camp counselors aren't the ones with the loudest voices or the most energy. They're the ones who know this one simple secret about keeping kids engaged while actually learning something meaningful. Let me take you back to my first summer as a camp counselor. I thought I had everything figured out. I planned these elaborate educational activities, printed worksheets, prepared lengthy explanations about science and history. And you know what happened? By day 2, I had kids asking when free time was starting. By day 5, I was basically bribing them with extra snack time just to pay attention. I felt like a complete failure. The other counselors seemed to have this magic touch, and I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. I was making the classic mistake that so many well-meaning adults make. I was trying to make camp feel like school, when what kids really needed was to learn through play. The breakthrough came when I realized something revolutionary. Kids don't hate learning. They hate being taught in boring ways. Here's the game-changing approach that transformed my entire camp experience, and it's surprisingly simple. Instead of teaching through lectures or worksheets, you disguise learning inside games that kids actually want to play. This isn't about dumbing down education or making everything silly. It's about understanding how children's brains naturally absorb information when they're having genuine fun. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it requires zero extra budget, minimal prep time, and works with any group size. Plus, kids often don't even realize how much they're learning until parents start commenting on all the new facts their children are sharing at dinner. Let's start with science and nature games, because these are absolute gold mines for keeping kids engaged while building real knowledge. The key here is turning the entire camp environment into a living laboratory. Take scavenger hunts, for example. But we're not talking about your basic find a pine cone hunt. We're creating ecosystem exploration missions. Kids search for different leaf shapes, animal tracks, or rock types while learning actual classification skills. You give them simple field guides, maybe even magnifying glasses, and suddenly they're thinking like real scientists. Why does this work so well? Children are naturally curious about the world around them. When you give them a mission that satisfies that curiosity, their brains light up with engagement. The learning happens automatically because they're actively seeking answers to solve the challenge. The specific benefit here is incredible. Kids develop observation skills, learn scientific vocabulary naturally, and start seeing patterns in nature that they'll remember for years. One camper told me months later that she was still identifying tree species on family hikes because of our camp scavenger hunts. Nature bingo is another powerful tool. Instead of calling out numbers, you're calling out wildlife and plants that kids need to spot and learn about. This gets everyone actively observing their environment instead of just walking through it. For hands-on science magic, try mystery powder investigations. Using completely safe household items like baking soda, salt, and flour, kids become real chemists conducting experiments. They learn the scientific method without even realizing it, because they're too busy trying to solve the mystery. Now let's talk about math adventures, because this is where you can really blow kids' minds by showing them that math isn't just numbers on a page. The secret is making math feel like real life instead of abstract concepts. The camp store concept is absolutely brilliant for this. Kids earn play money through various camp activities, then get to spend it at a mock store buying snacks or supplies. Suddenly, they're doing addition, subtraction, multiplication, and even basic budgeting because they have a real reason to care about getting the math right. Here's why this works so powerfully. Kids understand fairness and rewards instinctively. When math becomes the tool that helps them get what they want, They're motivated to master it. No more "when will I ever use this" complaints. Geometric treasure hunts transform abstract shapes into exciting discoveries. Teams search for objects that match specific shapes, or they measure different areas around camp. You're building spatial reasoning skills, while kids think they're just playing detective. Human graphs are pure genius for making data come alive. Kids line up by height, birthday, favorite camp activities, whatever you want to explore. They become the data points themselves, which makes statistics feel real and meaningful instead of just numbers on paper. History and geography can feel incredibly distant to kids, but role-playing games change everything. When children dress up and actually experience different time periods, history becomes a story they're living instead of facts they're memorizing. Time period challenges work beautifully. Kids might need to solve problems the way people did in ancient Egypt, or figure out how pioneers would have handled certain situations. They're learning customs, problem-solving methods, and historical context through experience. Geography relay races turn map skills into competitive fun. Teams run to match countries with capitals, landmarks with locations, or even climate patterns with regions. The physical movement helps cement the learning in their memory. Archaeological digs in sandbox areas are incredibly popular. Hide replica artifacts, give kids proper tools, and watch them discover ancient civilizations through hands-on exploration. They're learning about cultures, time periods, and even scientific excavation methods. Language arts might seem tricky to gamify, but kids are natural storytellers when you give them the right prompts. Storytelling circles with creative challenges build vocabulary and imagination simultaneously. Camp news projects turn kids into real journalists. They interview counselors, write articles about camp events, and create newsletters. They're practicing writing, interviewing skills, and communication without it feeling like homework. Word association games using camp experiences make language feel natural and relevant. Creative writing challenges based on their actual adventures give them meaningful content to work with. The final approach brings everything together through collaborative challenges. Problem-solving activities like building bridges with limited materials teach engineering concepts while requiring teamwork and communication. Ecosystem games, where each child represents a different animal or plant, help them understand interdependence in nature. They're learning biology, environmental science, and cooperation all at once. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. This sounds too good to be true, right? I was skeptical at first, too. How could games really teach as effectively as traditional methods? Wouldn't kids just focus on the fun and miss the learning? Here's what I discovered. Kids' brains are incredibly efficient learning machines when they're engaged. The game structure doesn't distract from learning. It actually enhances it by providing context, motivation, and memorable experiences that traditional teaching methods often lack. The research backs this up too. Multiple studies show that experiential learning and play-based education create stronger neural pathways and better long-term retention than passive learning methods. After implementing these game-based learning approaches for just 1 month, the changes were undeniable. Parents started asking what had changed at camp because their kids were coming home excited about science, sharing historical facts at dinner, and actually asking to practice math problems. Other counselors noticed too. Kids were more engaged, behavior problems decreased, and the energy at camp shifted from reluctant participation to genuine enthusiasm. Even the camp director commented on how different our group seemed compared to previous years. One parent told me her 8-year-old daughter had started a nature journal at home, inspired by our ecosystem scavenger hunts. Another mentioned that her son was calculating tips at restaurants because he wanted to practice the math skills from our camp store activities. Here's what I want you to try. Pick just one of these game-based approaches and commit to testing it for 1 full week. Don't try to implement everything at once. Choose the category that excites you most, whether that's science adventures, math challenges, history role-playing, language games, or team-building activities. Spend 15 minutes planning how you'll adapt one of these concepts to your specific camp environment and group. Then jump in and try it. Pay attention to how the kids respond, how engaged they become, and what kind of learning happens naturally through the play. Give it that full week because sometimes it takes a few days for kids to fully embrace a new approach. But I'm confident you'll start seeing the magic happen when learning disguises itself as pure fun. Remember, the smallest changes often create the biggest transformations. When you shift from trying to make kids learn to creating opportunities for them to discover, everything changes. You're not just filling time at camp. You're showing children that learning can be joyful, that curiosity leads to amazing discoveries, and that education doesn't have to feel like work. These games don't just teach facts. They build confidence, create positive associations with learning, and give kids tools they'll use long after camp ends. That's the real magic of disguising education as play. You're not just entertaining kids for a summer, you're potentially changing how they see learning for the rest of their lives.